So Nintendo Switch 2 just got some great news from the company's own president, Shintaro Furukawa, because you might be familiar with the fact that Nintendo just recently held their quarterly financial briefing, and there are some specific comments surrounding Switch 2 that should be something of a sigh of relief for people looking to pick up this console day one, because one major issue that we see happen around any new major in-demand technology launch is scalping, and that is going on right now as we speak with the Nvidia 50 series cards that launched. Dear God, good luck finding one of those at retail price. We of course saw the same issue with the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S around their console launches, albeit with a active pandemic going on, which definitely made things very tricky in terms of supply chain and having enough stock on the shelves. And Nintendo's president is actually making some pretty bold claims with what their strategy is going to be around just more or less eliminating scalping, and we do have a number of analysts weighing in on this with just how much stock we might see Nintendo actually deliver from a sales perspective. And these are high estimates, so Nintendo could indeed have been waiting longer than expected and riding out this current console generation longer than expected to not only get software ready to go, but to also truly stockpile some hardware and really deliver numbers that will ultimately make it more challenging for scalpers to really have a successful markup here, because if you can simply find it a week or two later at a store, you're probably not going to pay double or triple price like a lot of people will unfortunately opt to do in these types of scenarios. But the good news doesn't stop there, because we got some reconfirmation that of course the system is launching in this year and none of those plans have changed, which I don't think we would have expected them to. And we also have a few different sales numbers for Switch to go over that are pretty exciting, albeit at a pretty steep drop off in terms of what Nintendo forecasted for this year, and also where they are going to end up when it's all said and done. And I would like to briefly highlight the conversation on how Nintendo Switch is tracking when it comes to it potentially going down and finishing out its life cycle as the best video game console in history, period. So we're going to get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick it off right over at VGC, where they do have some translations available from a lot of the Nikkei articles and stuff, the Japanese publications that are putting these articles out here, but they do have some real translations themselves available. We may revisit some of the Q&A from Shintaro Furukawa's session with investors once Nintendo posts the official transcripts themselves. That probably won't come until a little bit later, towards the end of the week most likely. But here you can see Nintendo says it's making preparations for Switch 2 resellers. Shintaro Furukawa says Nintendo will put measures in place to prevent Switch 2 scalpers. And you have, continuing on down, speaking to the Japanese press for the first time since Switch 2's announcement on Tuesday, Shintaro Furukawa was asked how Nintendo plans to ensure a smooth launch for the console, especially considering the original Switch's history of stock shortages, which were often exacerbated by those seeking to resell consoles for profit. Furukawa said that Nintendo has made preparations based on its past experience and plan to prepare enough Switch 2 console inventory to meet demand. That's a big claim, and we'll dive into that more in a second. He said via Nikkei, translated by VGC, "We will take all possible measures based on the experience we have accumulated to date regarding scalpers and the like. We are making preparations." Following more than a year of leaks and speculation, Nintendo announced the Switch 2 last month, with a full reveal and global hands-on event planned beginning in April. According to an earlier Nikkei report, Nintendo had planned to launch the Switch 2 in late 2024, but priority was given to ensure the initial inventory of the successor console and a lineup of software titles at the time of its launch in an attempt to avoid widespread reselling. So the claim from Nikkei is that really how important this was to Nintendo to not just have a console you couldn't get your hands on, is that that's actually maybe one of the primary reasons they chose to launch in 2025 as opposed to the end of 2024, like so it was once believed that we would see happen. And we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail in a moment, but first I want to highlight just kind of what some of the analysts are saying about what the Switch 2 will do from a unit standpoint. And it says market research firm Circana has predicted that Nintendo Switch 2 will sell over 4 million units in the United States alone in 2025 if it's released in the first half of the year, accounting for approximately 1/3 of all video game console hardware units sold this year. Another research firm, DFC Intelligence, predicts that Switch 2 sales will exceed 80 million units by the end of 2028, which is more than the original Switch managed during its first 3 years on sale, which it achieved 55.77 million. Toyo Securities analyst Yasuda Hideki told Nikkei that he expects Switch 2 sales to reach 6 million units in the first 3 months. So the demand is going to be there for this console day one. That's one thing you have to realize. We will dive into it in a later slide. In fact, let's just quickly go to it. You have Nintendo Switch hardware sell through and annual users playing. This is a big metric because while we'll highlight at the end the amount of Switches that are being sold and all of Nintendo's financial results and stuff like that. But what you want to really know is that 8 years into this console's life cycle, 8 years essentially in March since it will have originally launched back in 2017, we are at 129 million annual users still logging into and playing the Nintendo Switch today. That is a big ecosystem of users that you have that are probably ready to upgrade, many of them at this point in time, and will want an early console, potentially day one, for Nintendo's successor to this hardware. So they have the numbers of players that can really make this a historical launch of console hardware, and then it's going to be up to Nintendo to actually supply sufficient levels of hardware where you don't just have all of these things sitting on eBay for double and triple price, because while you could just argue that Nintendo doesn't care if scalpers happen because they made the sale and things like that, that's a yes and no type of scenario, because really scalpers are not going out there and buying software, which is where Nintendo makes the majority of their money on that next generation hardware. Nintendo does like to be profitable right out of the gate with their next gen hardware, which is why we've been talking about the price. Maybe it's $399 and that's what I'm hoping for, but those $449 and $499 with the Mario Kart 8 bundle pack-in game doesn't seem like a totally off the table type of idea to have with this console, and the price point could deter some early adopters, especially in a month like May or June, like we're expecting it to launch in, right in the middle of the year, not necessarily near a holiday or anything like that. It's possible that would deter some of the sales, but as mentioned, 129 annual playing users on the Nintendo Switch ecosystem right now, and there's a Nintendo Switch 2, just a straightforward upgrade, bigger, better console of what people love to play still to this day right now, essentially 8 years after its launch. Nintendo has a huge opportunity on their hands here, and the great news aspect of this is that Shintaro Furukawa is just straight up confidently saying that they're taking the preparations, they're using their experience from the past of launching different consoles, and they're just going to have enough inventory to meet demand, according to Shintaro Furukawa. So, you know, that it's a big claim. It might be something he's just kind of telling to investors, and it's not necessarily something that we will really see Nintendo truly be able to deliver. And listen, don't get me wrong, I don't think we're going to be in a scalper free environment. There will be price hiking and people buying 8 to 10 of these consoles at a time and trying to resell them. But how effective is that ultimately going to be if Nintendo is truly flooding the market with frequent restocks, and just about any retailer you shop at, within a week or two time, they have another round of restocks hitting store shelves, and you're going to be able to walk in or purchase them online from these various retailers relatively easily. If that's the case, we shouldn't have too much of a scalping issue to worry about for Nintendo Switch 2, and that's really the biggest piece of great news that has come from this particular investor briefing. So obviously really good things to see here. Hopping very briefly back over to which I think we can zoom in on this just a little bit more, just so you know, you don't have to worry. Nintendo Switch 2 to be released in 2025. That's essentially what they did to confirm it in their slides. They mentioned, of course, the April Direct and the Nintendo Switch 2 experience. I was not expecting any kind of delay or some kind of last minute surprise, guys, we have to launch it early 2026. Like, that wasn't on the table to begin with, but Nintendo is reassuring fans here. They've already announced an April Direct for this thing. There is a hard timeline in place and an exact date and price point that Nintendo knows they're going to launch this console, and we're going to more or less just see them stick exactly to those plans, and we should hopefully learn what those plans are in terms of the launch date and the price point on April 2nd. At least that's what I am personally expecting. So now I want to shift gears just a little bit into how Nintendo is saying they will continue to support Switch after Switch 2's launch, because this is interesting if maybe you're somebody who is not necessarily going to pick up the Switch 2 day one and you want to know what's in store for you on the current generation of Nintendo family of systems right now. Maybe while you're sitting on the sidelines waiting to get a Switch 2, maybe you get it in holiday season 2025, or you might get it a year or two later. Maybe some people I'm seeing in comments want to wait till an OLED model comes out. Listen, I don't think that I will not wait 4 years for an OLED model. Definitely wouldn't advise of that. But if you are somebody who you recently got into the Switch ecosystem, you don't feel like you need an upgrade, this might very much apply to you. So As it says, Nintendo says it will continue to support Switch after Switch 2's launch as long as there's demand. Nintendo President Furukawa discusses the company's cross-gen plans. And you have here, Nintendo reported its latest earning results on Tuesday, confirming that the sales of the original Switch declined by 30% year-on-year for 9 months ended December. A few weeks after the sales period, the company finally announced Nintendo Switch 2 with a full reveal set in April. However, President Furukawa said in an earnings call reported by Sankei that he did not believe Switch 2's announcement would have a significant impact on the current sales of the original console. He also said the company would continue to support Switch beyond Switch 2 as long as there is demand. The Switch is now approaching 8 years old, and although hardware sales are declining, it is still enjoying unprecedented demand for a console at this point in its life cycle. So, what this tells me, not that you should be able to expect all of the Mario Kart goodness of 9 or 10 or Crossroads, whatever it ends up being called for Switch 2, but I do think that's a Switch 2 exclusive title. I don't think you're going to be able to expect too much cross-generational content. I think certain games that were already advertised for Switch 1 will get that, aka your Pokemon Legends ZA, your Metroid Prime 4s of the world. There is a shot for those games to have both a current Switch and Switch 2 version. Outside of that, when you talk about your new Mario Karts, your 3D Marios, the next big Zelda project, whether it be a more in-depth remake of Ocarina of Time or a more simple port or remaster, a port or remaster is in the conversation, but the big Zelda project, I think it's all system exclusive. You talk about the new Smash Bros, you talk about the next Animal Crossing, the next Splatoon, all that stuff is going to be exclusively on the new console, but Furukawa is making it a point to acknowledge just how successful the Switch continues to be, and even though it's 8 years old plus, people still want to pick it up, and if there's a price drop, that may help them get over where they want to ultimately go down as is the most successful piece of console hardware in history. It would be a cool title to have. I don't think Nintendo like super cares about that, but obviously it would be a win if they could attach that to the Nintendo Switch name. And so the support's not going to fall off of a cliff. We're still going to be seeing Nintendo Directs for the Switch 2 in September and even February of, say, the next year that will outline some level of software support, maybe just 1 or 2 titles that are a little bit smaller in scope and scale that will come to the Nintendo Switch 1 and that family of consoles. And I think Nintendo is just straight up acknowledging that here, that they might have something more of a longer roadmap of support than they typically have had in the past with console generations. But Nintendo, with their big heavy hitter software, they will be very quick to move on still to Switch 2, in my personal opinion. Okay, now from here, let's talk about just briefly what the financial results look like for Switch 1, because I mean, these are some quotes really just from mainly analysts, industry analysts and stuff like that. But Switch 2 can't come soon enough. Nintendo lowers forecast again as Switch sales decline 30%. Switch has now cleared 150 million, but sales are slowing faster than Nintendo expected. And the long and short of this article really has to do with the fact that we're basically investor briefing after investor briefing at this point. We are seeing Nintendo actually lower their forecast overall. They are not hitting the numbers that they originally thought that they could within this year. I believe they started out at something like 13.5 million, and we are now down to the 11 million range in terms of the console forecast. So it was 12.5, and then now I believe they're going down to 11 million. Yeah, lowered its hardware sales forecast to 11 million for the current fiscal year ending March 31st. So again, previously lowered it, after it previously lowered its 13.5 to 12.5, and now we're down to 11. So clearly Nintendo is seeing the hardware sales decline quicker than maybe they were anticipating. But that said, they are still having some banger performance in terms of software and things like that. And in fact, it's not so much of this I want to highlight, but just a few pieces of software. It's not the major early console lifecycle type of software sales that we sometimes see Nintendo achieve, but we got to highlight, and give some credit where credit's due. And listen, Mario Party's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, because Jamboree absolutely crushing it. Released October 17th and has sold over 5.6 million copies. I believe I read somewhere that's the best trajectory from a sales perspective from a Mario Party game ever. Absolutely insane. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, while it's not necessarily tracking at the pace that Link's Awakening was, and it is a brand new top-down 2D Zelda, albeit released pretty late in the Switch's life cycle, 3.4 million copies sold from September 26, 2024 release date through the end of the year. Not a bad start for that game at all. Mario and Luigi Brothership cleared the 1 million, 1.4 million to be exact, but I would say that there's a little bit more hesitation on what Nintendo may do with that franchise going forward. But hey, we got it. Essentially, we got something to clear the 1.4 million title, and that's also in a pretty saturated year for Mario RPG games, keep in mind, because we had Thousand Year Door and then Super Mario RPG prior to that, all kind of been releasing pretty quick, next to each other. Of course, we have some upcoming first-party titles, some that are already out, like your Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, but this is Nintendo in their big transition year right now, and they highlight different things like the Universal expansions and the theme parks opening and stuff, but really what it's all about in Nintendo's mind at this point is gearing up and shifting to Switch 2. And while Switch 1 continues to sell and have a ton of active players, and it has some good software sales, it is very much becoming the age of Nintendo Switch 2 going forward. And I do think that if all the moves are right and Nintendo really does support Switch for the foreseeable future for another year or two, and they provide some price cuts in addition to still releasing some software for it, there is a world where Nintendo slowly gets to that 160 million plus units and ultimately takes the crown of the best selling console piece of hardware ever. I think they can do it, but it's also not a guarantee. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of all of the financial briefing results from Nintendo this time around. Are you relieved? And are you like me and think it's some great news statements from Furukawa to see him doubling down on this preventing scalping situation and just straight up saying he's going to have enough product to meet market demand? Do you buy into that? Do you think that it's all just talk for investors and really we're still going to see massive widespread shortages with this thing? And what do you think about some of the software and hardware performance for Nintendo Switch this late into its life cycle? Are you impressed by it? Do you think Nintendo is maybe holding on to a good thing for just a little bit too long? And obviously, I should mention briefly, we didn't have a direct announcement so far at the time of filming, so I'm assuming it's not this week, probably next week, but nothing's guaranteed until Nintendo announces it. But Nate the Hate still seems to think there's one coming in the month of February, but is not clear on when the date will be. I don't think it's going to be the same week of the Pokemon Presents, aka meaning we pretty much have next week and the week after to potentially see Nintendo hold a direct presentation focused on Switch 1 software ahead of their April Direct that will cover Switch 2 stuff. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.